I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the sidewalk. A neat two-story tucked into a quiet street of Woodhaven, Kansas. White siding, blue shutters, a wraparound porch where neighbors waved whenever they passed. People saw my family and imagined warmth inside those walls. Sunday dinners, laughter echoing up the staircase, parents who adored their daughters equally. But that postcard belonged to someone else's story. Behind those polished curtains, the truth was colder, sharper. I learned early that love in our home wasn't unconditional. It was performance-based, and my sister Jessica always stole the stage. From my earliest memories, Jessica was the star they orbited around. 4 years older, she seemed born for applause. When she brought home a trophy, Patricia, Mom, cleared a prime spot on the mantle, dusting it daily like a holy relic. Dad, Michael, would beam with pride, shaking her hand like she'd just closed $1 million business deal. "She's got that drive we always hoped for," he'd say. And Mom would add, "She's a natural leader, just like us." I tried to shine too. Piano lessons that left my fingers stiff. Hours of practice until the notes blurred into each other. Debate team, where I pushed my voice louder just to be heard. Art competitions where I poured myself into colors and brushstrokes. Once, when I was 8, I won first place in a local art fair. My drawing of a lake at sunset taped proudly to a cardboard display. I brought the ribbon home, chest swelling, waiting for their faces to light up. Patricia glanced once, muttered, "Cute hobby," and then pivoted, her eyes sparkling as she announced, "But your sister just placed first in the Math Olympics." "That's real talent." Dad nodded, approving, and in that instant, my little ribbon shrank to nothing. The comparisons never ended. Dinner table conversations were scripted to highlight Jessica's brilliance. "Your sister's speech won over the whole school," Mom would say, stabbing her fork into her salad as if the matter were sealed. Dad would add, "She's got charisma. It's a gift, Megan." I chewed my food quietly, pretending their words didn't burn. If I tried to talk about something I'd done, a new song on the piano, a grade I was proud of, the silence swallowed me whole. Or worse, Mom would correct my posture, comment on my clothes, find a flaw to smother whatever pride I had dared to feel. Even playtime wasn't free. In the backyard, if Jessica and I fought over a swing, Mom always ruled in her favor. "Stop being selfish, Megan," she'd say, her voice sharp enough to cut. Dad never intervened. He'd pat my shoulder later, offering his default line, "Let it go, kiddo. Family harmony matters." Harmony. That word became a leash around my throat. By middle school, I learned to fade into the background. Fewer spotlights meant fewer chances to fail. But invisibility was its own punishment. My mother's criticisms grew sharper, aimed at me like darts. "Megan, that shirt makes you look sloppy. Change before school. Your hair looks unkempt. Why can't you sit straighter, smile more, try harder?" Every breakfast felt like an inspection. I was slim, but her words made me doubt every glance in the mirror. Dad wasn't cruel, not directly. His version of love was quieter, but no less damaging. When I told him I wanted to study marketing, his brow furrowed. "Why not accounting like us? Your sister's already interning at a firm. You'd be smart to follow in her footsteps." His tone left no room for debate. And so I swallowed my own voice, again and again, until silence became second nature. High school only amplified the divide. Jessica breezed through with honors, her college acceptance to a top business program celebrated with champagne and a family party. Photos posted online. Mom and Dad smiling beside their golden daughter, captions bragging about her bright future. I stayed behind, enrolling in community college to save money and help out at the family accounting firm. "It'll be good experience," Dad said, handing me a stack of client files as if my future belonged behind their reception desk. Jessica left for the city. I stayed behind, tethered by duty. And yet, I still clung to scraps of hope. Maybe if I kept giving, my time, my effort, my silence, they would see me. Maybe one day they'd say, "Good job, Megan." But years bled into each other, and that moment never came. One memory lingers sharp as glass. I was 17, the night before Jessica's senior prom. I had saved up to buy her a silk hair ribbon she'd admired weeks earlier in a boutique downtown, a pale lavender shade that matched her dress. I presented it nervously in the living room, wrapped in tissue paper, hoping she'd smile and hug me, anything. Jessica unwrapped it, eyes flickering with surprise before she tossed it aside. Cute, but David's already bought me a diamond bracelet. She flashed it like a prize. Mom gasped with delight. Dad chuckled, shaking his head. And I sat there, invisible, clutching the discarded tissue paper in my lap. It wasn't just the favoritism, it was the absence, the lack of acknowledgement, the erasure of my efforts. The house was full of voices, but none of them spoke to me. By the time I reached my 20s, the cycle was ingrained. I worked at a small marketing agency nearby, a job that barely covered rent for my modest apartment 3 blocks from their house. But even independence was short-lived. Mom's dizzy spells began, and I was drafted as chauffeur, nurse, and secretary. I can't manage alone, Megan, she'd insist, voice dripping with fragility. Dad reinforced the guilt with daily calls. Your mom's relying on you. Family first. Meanwhile, Jessica thrived in the city. High-rise apartment, corporate executive position, glamorous vacations with David. She visited twice a year at most, transforming each stay into a victory lap. Mom and Dad would beam at her stories, ask endless questions about promotions and wedding plans. And me? I served meals, cleared plates, and quietly retreated to the kitchen when the laughter grew too loud. Some nights, lying awake in my small apartment, I wondered if maybe I was cursed with invisibility. If some cosmic mistake had placed me in the wrong family. But then I'd remember those fleeting moments. The way Dad's hand sometimes lingered on my shoulder when he said, "Let it go, kiddo." Or the rare times Mom softened, asking me to brush her hair during her dizzy spells. I fed myself on crumbs, mistaking them for meals, telling myself maybe tomorrow things would be different. The older I got, the more the cracks widened. I dated a boy named Ryan for a while, a kind soul who made me laugh. I thought maybe, finally, someone saw me. But when I brought him home for dinner, Mom grilled him about his career prospects, comparing him unfavorably to Jessica's boyfriend. He's nice, she said afterward, but not driven like David. Jessica knows how to pick them. Ryan never came back after that night. I didn't blame him. Who would want to fight for someone who didn't even fight for herself? And yet, I kept bending, twisting, contorting myself to fit into their narrow mold of worth. Every sacrifice a silent bargain. If I give enough, if I work hard enough, maybe they'll let me belong. The truth? I already knew the answer. But denial is a powerful thing, and so I kept trying. Years later, when Jessica announced her engagement to David, Mom's eyes gleamed as if the universe had rewarded her patience. It's the match we always dreamed of, she declared, already sketching out wedding plans on the back of an envelope. Dad raised his glass that night, his toast booming across the table, to Jessica, our shining star. My name never crossed his lips. I swallowed my wine, heart pounding, and whispered a silent vow to myself. This time, I'll make them proud. This wedding will be my chance to prove I belong. It was a foolish, desperate hope. But at the time, it was all I had. 3 days after Brandon's hospital ambush, Eric arrived. No flowers, no forced sympathy, just a leather briefcase placed quietly on the hospital table. Are you certain you want to do this? He asked, his voice low but steady. I lifted my eyes to his, unwavering. Yes, it starts tomorrow. He nodded once. He was the only one who knew the truth. The contract signed under my mother's name, the careful veil I had woven to hide my identity as CEO of SilverMed. For years I'd lived modestly, my power tucked behind curtains, because I thought a peaceful marriage mattered more than recognition. Looking back, I realized I had been too kind. That kindness ended now. The next morning, with a hand that barely trembled from the IV drip, I signed a termination letter. A single sheet of paper. Precise. Lethal. Effective immediately, SilverMed was ending its supply agreement with Vital Tech, the logistics company where Brandon worked. That contract made up 60% of their revenue last quarter. Brandon had boasted for months that his pitch had sealed the deal with a mystery partner. He never realized that partner was me, one wall away in the same house he treated like his kingdom. The letter went out at 8 a.m. By 3 p.m., my hospital phone rang. Mrs. Scott? This is Peterson, CEO of Vital Tech. His voice was strained. We were surprised by your decision. If possible, may we know the reason? I let silence hang for a beat. Then, calm and crisp. One of your employees demonstrated inappropriate behavior, including disrespect toward female colleagues and misuse of company assets. As a partner, I cannot condone that. A pause. Then, carefully, the employee's name? Brandon Scott. The quiet on the line stretched long enough to make my pulse slow. Then Peterson exhaled. Understood. That evening, Brandon came home late, shoulders slumped, the swagger stripped clean. He opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and stood there, silent, for several minutes. Finally, his voice cracked. I got laid off. I set my book down, calm, deliberate, because of the terminated contract with my company. His head snapped toward me. What? I rose slowly, walked to the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out an envelope, placed it gently on the table. My tone was almost soothing, like explaining something to a child. I'm the one who ended that contract. I'm the CEO of SilverMed, Brandon. The company you bragged about winning over. The company you thought you convinced with your charm. He froze. His hands shook as he tore open the envelope. Inside, divorce papers, asset division terms, and a scheduled meeting with my lawyer. This can't be real, he stammered. It's real. You have 30 days to vacate the house. My house. I only added your name to the deed to appease your pride. The $3,200 mortgage payment? No longer covered. And from now on, your allowance is gone. His eyes darted, desperate, searching for the man who once believed he ruled me. But all he saw was the woman who had carried him, financially, emotionally, silently, for years. I turned away, leaving him standing in a silence thicker than any scream. The dominoes began to fall quickly. Vital Tech didn't just fire him. They placed a formal warning in his file: misconduct, lack of integrity. In an industry built on trust, that stain spread fast. By the end of the week, partner companies had quietly circulated his record. Brandon Scott became the man no one wanted to hire. 3 nights later, the hospital phone rang again. Midnight. His name lit the screen. I answered, leaning back against crisp, white pillows, my voice calm. Caitlyn, he gasped, voice raw, almost unrecognizable. Please, just hear me out. I said nothing. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I thought you were just some dependent woman, Celeste, but now I know you were the one holding everything together. Without you, everything's gone. The house is about to be foreclosed. The company blacklisted me. Please give me another chance. I let the silence stretch, savoring every desperate syllable. You had a decade, I said finally, my tone cold steel. A decade to respect me, to love me, to share the burden. And you chose contempt instead. Now you've lost everything, and only now you see my worth? Too late. Please, he begged, his voice cracking. We were happy once. Remember those times? I know you're angry, but... Brandon, I cut in softly, almost tenderly. Do you remember the name Alyssa? The line went dead silent. I could hear his breathing hitch, sharp as a knife. How did you? Peterson mentioned an internal complaint. They found out about your late nights with the new intern. Alyssa Morgan, 24, daughter of the Chicago branch director. Should I go into detail about the hotel receipts? His words tumbled out, frantic. No, it's not what you think. It wasn't like that. You're right, I said, my voice razor thin. It was worse. And then I hung up. I stared at the dark screen, my reflection faint in the glass. For the first time in years, I felt no ache, no longing, no hesitation. Only clarity. I opened my contacts. Hit block. Then I called my lawyer. Eliza, I want a no-contact clause, and I want a file for emotional damages. Her tone sharpened, professional. With proof of infidelity, Minnesota law allows us to seek damages. Do you have evidence? More than enough. A week later, Eliza came to my hospital room with a folder thick as a brick. Screenshots of flirtatious texts, selfies with Alyssa at Vital Tech's office, time-stamped and geotagged, hotel receipts, late-night messages. I've already filed a demand for $85,000 in damages, she said. He'll contest it, but with this evidence, the court will be on your side. I flipped through the pages. Every suspicion I had buried, every doubt I had silenced, was laid bare in black and white. I didn't feel rage, I didn't feel grief, only relief. Good, I whispered. Let him drown in his own choices. Meanwhile, Brandon's unraveling accelerated. Collection calls filled his nights. With no income, no savings, and his pride too fractured to lean on friends for long, he sold the car he once called his symbol of freedom. Part of the cash went to pay off the mountain of credit card debt I had quietly managed for years. And Alyssa? She vanished. Her parents pulled her out of the company, cut ties, and sent her back to their farm in Iowa, desperate to bury the scandal. For them, she was collateral damage. For me, she was simply confirmation. Brandon's kingdom had crumbled, and I was still standing. But I wasn't finished. Every time he tried to contact me, emails, social media, even showing up at SilverMed's headquarters, security escorted him out. My instructions were clear. Brandon Scott was no longer allowed anywhere near my world. He had mistaken dependence for love, silence for weakness. He didn't love me. He simply didn't know how to exist without me. That wasn't my burden anymore. The courtroom was colder than any hospital room. Polished oak, fluorescent lights, the faint scent of dust and ink. I sat beside Eliza, my lawyer, while Brandon shuffled in across the aisle. His once proud shoulders sagged under a cheap suit that didn't quite fit. He couldn't meet my eyes. The evidence laid out spoke for me. Flirtatious texts, late-night selfies, hotel receipts, the damning internal report from Vital Tech. Every page was a mirror Brandon could not turn away from. When the judge read the findings aloud, infidelity proven, damages awarded to the betrayed spouse, Brandon flinched as if each word were a physical blow. $85,000. A number that once upon a time I could have written off as a minor inconvenience. But today it wasn't about the money. It was about dignity, sealed in ink. The gavel fell. Case closed. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. I simply stood, gathered my papers, and walked past the man who had once been my whole future. His lips parted as if he wanted to beg again, but no words came. My heels clicked against the marble floor, steady and unbroken, as I left him behind. The months that followed carved Brandon into a husk. Without a home, he bounced between temporary couches and cheap apartments. Debt collectors hunted him like wolves. The car he once polished every Sunday was gone, sold for pennies. His reputation in logistics was ash. No company wanted a man whose name came with scandal attached. I heard whispers of his new reality: night shifts at a delivery center, minimum wage, bills piling higher than his paycheck. His old friends stopped answering calls. His family, embarrassed, kept their distance. Sometimes I wondered if he replayed our last conversation at night, the one where I told him it was too late. If he realized now that every insult, every dismissal, every betrayal had been nails in his own coffin. But I didn't linger on him long. His ruin wasn't my prison anymore. My battle was still in my own body. Chemo drained me. My hair fell away, clumps caught in the shower drain, leaving me staring at a stranger in the mirror. My skin grew pale, my muscles weak. But inside, something fierce burned brighter than ever. I fought not just for survival, but for the life I had only just begun to claim. And then, one crisp autumn morning, my doctor entered with a smile that reached his eyes. "Your scans are clear. No signs of the tumor. Caitlyn, you're in remission." I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply closed my eyes, took his hand, and whispered, "Thank you." For the first time in years, I felt reborn. When I returned to SilverMed after 2 months of rest, I expected indifference. Business moved on, with or without me. Instead, I walked into the main conference room to find my entire team waiting. They rose to their feet. Applause thundered against the walls. Eric grinned and handed me a mug that read, "Welcome back, boss." The sound of clapping washed over me, not just as celebration, but as affirmation. I had doubted whether I could rebuild after so much loss. But in that moment, surrounded by loyal faces, I knew I hadn't just survived. I had come back stronger. Life shifted. For the first time in decades, I rewrote my budget, without a husband's living expenses column. I stepped back from the grind, approving Eric's plan to hire a COO so I could finally breathe. My evenings no longer bled into endless work. And slowly, peace crept in. I moved into a small lakeside house in Duluth, far from the shadows of my old suburban cage. It wasn't grand, not like the house Brandon once strutted through. But when I stood on the porch at dawn, watching the sun scatter gold across the water, I felt something no mansion had ever given me: freedom. The walls held no memories of slammed doors or bitter silences. Only the sound of birdsong, the scent of pine drifting in with the breeze, the laughter of neighbors who waved without judgment. It was mine, entirely mine. Rumors of Brandon's downfall spread like wildfire through the business community. He had become a cautionary tale. The logistics employee who lost everything through arrogance, infidelity, and betrayal. Vital Tech quietly circulated his termination record, ensuring his name remained toxic ink in the industry. The last I heard, he was working nights at a warehouse, shuffling packages under flickering fluorescent lights. Calls from debt collectors filled his dark apartment, The kind of phone rings that make your chest clench with dread. As for Alyssa, she disappeared from the corporate world entirely. Her family settled part of my damages privately, desperate to avoid public litigation. I heard whispers that they had sent her back to Iowa, stripping her of the glittering city life she once flaunted. Collateral damage. Both of them. But me? I thrived. My hair grew back, short and soft. A crown of resilience. I took long walks along the lakeshore, feeling the breeze on my face, letting silence soothe me instead of suffocate me. I brewed tea in the mornings, read books without guilt, allowed myself to exist without performance. Date invitations trickled in, business partners, old acquaintances who had followed my story online. I declined them all. Not because my heart had closed forever, but because I wasn't ready to give it away again. For the first time in my life, I belonged wholly to myself. One weekend afternoon, Eric visited. We sat on the porch, mugs of tea in hand, the lake shimmering gold under the setting sun. "Ever think about getting married again?" he asked, half teasing. I smiled faintly, watching the water ripple. "Not right now. Maybe someday. But for now, I'm happy like this." He nodded, satisfied. Silence stretched between us, warm and unhurried. The breeze carried the scent of pine and damp earth, and I breathed it in deeply. I had overcome more than betrayal, more than illness. I had overcome the fear that once kept me silent, the belief that my worth depended on someone else's recognition. Now I knew better. Looking back, I realized resilience isn't built in moments of strength. It's born in the ashes, when you rise after being pushed to your lowest. I once gave my heart to someone unworthy. I once sacrificed in silence, convinced love meant endurance. But now? Now I live for myself. No longer begging. No longer invisible. No longer defined by anyone else's standards. Happiness began the day I chose self-respect over everything else. And when I stood on that porch, the breeze cool against my skin, I whispered to myself, not as a vow, not as a plea, but as truth. I wrote the final chapter, and it belongs to me.